Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I think we are slowly gathering in this webinar. I cannot see the participants list, unfortunately, but I think we are starting to be filling up the space for that webinar today. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the Science Europe webinar on promoting ecological sustainability in research organizations. My name is Sarah Ackerman. I'm head of sustainability at the Swiss National Science Foundation, and I have the great pleasure to moderate the fantastic session today. And as the participants will slowly sign up to this meeting, I would just like to say a couple of words about today's webinar before we then start to go into the discussions. So today is the last of a series of webinars called Green Research Talks, which has as an aim to raise awareness on and to discuss solutions geared to reduce the ecological footprint of research activities, with the hope to then stimulate networking and to empower action. Today's webinar aims to address the actions needed to promote the ecological sustainability and research activities of research activities and the whole RNI system. Today's webinar will function as follows. We'll have three inputs of three different organizations today, and they will all speak between 15 and 20 minutes each, some a little less, some a little bit more, but just so that we have enough space for discussion at the very end for about 15 minutes. And I would like to ask you to post your questions in the chat. And if you have a question that is particularly dedicated at one of the speakers, then please indicate to which person you'd like to address your question. And please note that the session will be recorded or is already being recorded so that we can have that video and share it with our colleagues as well. So I have the great pleasure to introduce the distinguished speakers today. We'll start off with an input by Dr. Philip Weber. He's a sustainability project officer at IMBO, and his work focuses very much at promoting exchange of stakeholders on sustainable research. And he recently also co-organized a workshop on funders' role in promoting environmentally sustainable research. The next input will be by Shule Karamik. She is a sustainability coordinator at Formas, which is the Swedish Research Council for Sustainable Development, and she's in charge of supervising, executing, and promoting sustainability initiatives within the organization. The last input will be from two colleagues of the Dutch Research Council, NWO. Anne-Marie will first speak, and she's the sustainability officer in charge of developing, implementing, and coordinating NWO's sustainability policy. And then we'll have also Dr. Joseph Stoeffer. He's a senior policy advisor and program manager at NWO, in charge of developing policies and research programs, among other on climate transition. With that, I would like to pass the word to the first speaker. Philip Weber, please, the stage is yours. And don't forget to post your questions in the chat. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. It still takes here a second. Now, can you see my first slide? Brilliant. So, yeah, thank you for the kind introduction and the invitation to talk at this important webinar series. I'm really excited to be able to report today a little bit of what EMBO is doing in its 60th year of existence. So EMBO is an organization whose mission is to promote excellence in the life sciences. It's a very unique membership organization. We have more than 2,000 leading life scientists in Europe and beyond that are really guide the execution of our programs and activities. For instance, they are part of our councils and committees. And our main goal is to support really talented researchers with funding throughout all of stages of their career, but also to stimulate exchange of scientific information and networking. And one way of doing that is the EMBO workshops and courses, and also the global activities and the policy work. And I will talk about this a little bit more later. And finally, here to the right, you see that EMBO is also a publisher with several life science journals that really put also an effort in around open science and improving the review process. So the programs of EMBO, they are financed by the European Molecular Biology Conference. So this is an intergovernmental organization with 31 member states in Europe. And we also have associated member states, which are India, Singapore, Thailand, Chile, and Japan. And this internationality makes EMBO also ideally suited for facilitating exchange also on global issues. And I want to zoom out now a little bit from this European map to set the scene for today. So here you see probably one of the most defining pictures for humanity, the blue marble, which was taken by astronauts of the Apollo 17 mission on their way to the moon. And maybe you can appreciate this thin layer, our atmosphere that surrounds our planet. And this is really the only place where we know that life exists at the moment. And yeah, in this space, our economies, cultures, and societies, they are really thriving. But recently, the pace of our activities and the globalized nature of it really leads also to an endangerment of the integrity of this whole system. And the team around the earth scientists of Johan Rockström, they really try to define thresholds for the core processes that endanger humanity. And I'm sure most of you have heard of the planetary boundaries framework, and that we are now beyond 6 of 9 of the planetary boundaries. Here in the center, you see in green the safe operating space for humanity, and from that radiating these burning amber colors that really indicate risk zones for humanity. And I really don't want to go into detail here, and just want to make the point that all of these zones, they are really interconnected. Of course, we have the core boundaries, climate change, we have the biodiversity, and also novel entities, which is really all the waste that we release in the environment. And yeah, there's really this large body of literature that they are all interconnected. So that means we cannot really focus on one of the issues alone. And so it doesn't really look too great, but there is a small window of opportunity for us that will pass in the next couple of years. So here in the back, you see Ho Sung Lee, the chair of the IPCC at the time when the last synthesis report was released, and he summarized the full report with the words, "We are walking when we should be sprinting." And I think this really expresses quite well the urgency of the situation. And yeah, there is a big task at hand, and for this we need everyone in the boat really to shift developmental pathways towards sustainability. We need the decision makers, policy makers, and also organizational individuals. And I think also the research system can play a really important role in that. And only if we collaborate, we might be able to end up on this path here towards the green planet, where we end up in a scenario where most of our SDGs are achieved and we have very low emissions. And this is the only planet actually where our children and we can have a good life. So which role do the life sciences have now in this transformation? I just want to quickly show you how this is discussed. And we have on the one hand studies like climate science, needs biology, or molecular biology for green recovery, which clearly pinpoint towards that the research can be part of the solutions. But then there's also other voices that say, look, we are also contributing to the problem. So labs should cut their plastic waste too, or some even see that as a paradox in the life sciences. But overall, we can really say that there's no shared understanding of the responsibilities. But what this basically translates into are 2 core questions. First one is, how can research contribute to maintaining a safe operating space for humanity, and how can we organize our research to stay within the planetary boundaries, so our research practices? And I think we really have to consider both of these questions. Both of them are relevant if we think of how to promote ecological sustainability in the research system. Yeah, so where do we start now with this? For me, I did my PhD in bacterial cell biology. For me, it's so just natural to start in the lab space. And here you see a lab and some of the processes that are currently unsustainable. Maybe if you also come from the lab, you might recognize here the freezers and the fume hoods and also the computing that all rely really on constant energy supply. And if your lab is powered by fossil fuels, this has an effect, of course, on two boundaries and maybe more. Then we have a lot of water usage in the lab, and there's an extra boundary for that, freshwater exchange. And then, yeah, there's the material. And this I want to really use as broad as possible. So everything that we buy, actually, all the chemicals, all the machines, from their production till their disposal, this would all go into this boundary. And without putting too much effort, I think we managed to identify already 5 out of 9 boundaries that are affected by everyday lab activities. And it might be really obvious, but even though we study nature in the lab, the life science, we study life in the lab, the lab is really often perceived, also seen as a sterile place that is not connected with nature and the environment, but of course we are integrated into the unsustainable economies and part of our planet. And of course, we are also integrated into the research ecosystem. And if we want to address the systemic issues also from out of the lab or from the research perspective, then I think it's really crucial to have a shared understanding of practice. And with this in mind, I want to highlight some of the steps that EMBO has taken to promote sustainability in the life sciences. So EMBO is a large funder for scientific courses and workshops with more than 11,000 participants every year. And of course, we are also concerned about the environmental impact of these events. So this is why we fund also fully virtual events and also hybrid settings, so with additional fundings. And there's also a badge to recognize efforts around reducing the impact of our events. Then we have the EMBO Lab Sustainability Award. This is a very new program, and I'm looking forward to that we can announce the award winner in a couple of weeks. And then just a few weeks ago, we hosted a policy workshop that Sarah mentioned on funders. And I'm using now the last minutes to really share some of these very preliminary results of what has been discussed there. So the title was Funders' Role in Promoting Environmentally Sustainable Research. And to the best of my knowledge, it was the first multi-stakeholder international workshop of this scope. And it was really fantastic to organize this together with Sandra Bendisholi and Gerlind Wallon here at EMBO. And on this slide, you see very nicely the geographical spread of the organization that participated in this event. In red, you see that we have a strong emphasis on the funders, but for us, it was also important to include other stakeholders like research performing organizations and also grassroots initiatives like Green Labs Netherlands or Labo 1.5 from France, and also creators for tools. And also we had social scientists to bring in these perspectives. And we discussed really funder strategies and measures. We try to highlight opportunities and also identify challenges and gaps. We're talking about roles and responsibilities, and in the end also try to really define milestones and to think about our priorities for the next steps. And we had one particular session also on the integration of sustainability consideration into funding processes. And I want to share like 3 examples from participating organizations, what first steps these organizations took. So I want to start with the German Research Foundation. They have published in June last year that they will anchor sustainability consideration in their funding activities. And now it becomes reality from the 1st of September 2024. There will be a reflection paragraph in their forms, and it will include all of the forms and mandatory to all applications. And this newly gathered information is supposed to be taken also into account when decisions are made in a sort of plausibility check. And yeah, there are two quotes from this document here to the right that I just want to share with you. So for the DFG, it's really important for people to learn from each other, and given that it's new to everyone involved. And secondly, a close dialogue between actors in the research system will be important, and I couldn't agree more to that statement. And then we have Wellcome's new environmental sustainability policy, which was just published in April 2024. And what really stands out here is that Wellcome sets environmental sustainability standards for researchers. And I just want to pick one very concrete point for lab-based environments, because this is where I'm from. And here they will require really a minimum level of accreditation of a lab certification schemes for their labs. And interestingly, it's not only a task, it's not only the responsibility for the labs themselves, for the researchers, but a shared task also for institutions. And also interestingly is then when sustainability measures come with additional cost, then this can also be included in the applications and covered by the grant. And then I picked another point just because I think it's also relevant today, and this is that organizations in high-income countries here must sign up to the UK Concordat for environmental sustainability. And you might have heard earlier about this in the webinar series, but it's like an effort of the whole UK research and innovation sector, which really commits signatories to include environmental sustainability into all aspects of their work. And it got recently published on the Wellcome website. And one funder that is also part of the launch signatories is the Cancer Research UK. And I want to highlight that they also published a new policy recently. And yeah, from researchers, they also demand a lab certification scheme, but here they go even one step further on the silver level. And for organization, they really ask the supported organization to also sign the Concordat. And I think this is a very nice example of also how funders in the UK and other organizations work together towards a shared goal. And yeah, now I want to share some of the preliminary results of the workshop, also to spark a little bit the discussion. So as said, this is preliminary, but we will publish a report on that also soon together with all the participants. So here you see like an exercise that we did, and we were thinking about the possible effects of the integration of consideration into grant applications for the different stakeholders. So for the researchers, for instance, if done right, I mean, this is a little bit looking into the future, can really promote self-reflection. It can improve also research practices and might lead also to cost savings at some point. And on the negative side of things, we have an increased workload. And also, yeah, it could be perceived as limiting the freedom of research. For the RPOs, we have similar effects. There's also a reflection on the outcomes on the research output of the RPOs. And on the long run, it could also lead to cost savings. But on the short term, it's clear that it might also need some resources, for instance, to monitor compliance. And there's also the question, how much are RPOs involved when we address like researchers with the applications? And then finally, on the funders, I think it can be a great tool to provide direct feedback from researchers, to have this communication channel through the application. Of course, it triggers also thinking within the own organization and might give also information about the research areas. But then in the end, there's also new data gathered. So that means there could be an increased workload for funders and also expertise that is necessary. And these outcomes, they translate actually in some challenges and questions for the different stakeholders. So for the funders, if we gather this new information on the footprint of research, for instance, how do we weigh this? Then connected to that, how can we be fair to all fields of research, and where do we get the expertise from to make these decisions? Then if we can already anticipate that it will be an adaptive process, how can we really plan that in? And then this broad question, how does this affect academic freedom, and how can we prevent also adding more pressure on the already highly pressured researchers? And finally, how can we prevent that it just becomes an exercise, right, to feel morally light and that it leads to something? And there's of course more points, but I think it really becomes clear that collaboration with and feedback from researchers and RPOs are really crucial to make this successful. And now we move on to the RPOs. So here there's really the question also, where do they get the expertise from? How can RPOs get a clear understanding of their environmental footprint? And of course, carbon is a challenge, but also biodiversity is a challenge. So here, I think they really clearly need the researchers also to provide knowledge to them. And for the researchers, how are they going to deal with the different requirements from the different funders, and also for the changing when they change in the future, and also where do they get the time, tools, and expertise from? So it's clear that collaboration is absolutely key. And I want to just share like 3 quotes that I found remarkable. Is the knowledge gain you will get from this project worth the emissions? We all know we can't do nothing, so let's all agree to do something. And finally, and we literally don't have all the answers, but it's about putting our research and the institutions that we fund on notice. So we don't really know how we will get there, but we do know that we can only achieve this together. And this is one impression from the workshop, where different organizations really try to collaborate to think of how could the road to 2045 look like. And finally, I want to just close with a few points that the participating organizations agreed upon. So they all agreed that we cannot risk doing nothing, that funders should highlight the importance of sustainability aspects in funding schemes, that funding agencies should have ambition towards sustainability goals and also share a set of principles towards sustainability, that we should involve other stakeholders in those processes, and also fund and coordinate the development and adoption of calculation and certification tools. And there will be a follow-up meeting planned happening soon, planned for end of July. And of course, we welcome also more stakeholders to join in this discussion. And I want to end with the call for multi-stakeholder collaboration towards a sustainable research system, maybe based on efforts that have started in the UK, the Concorded. So thank you very much for your attention, and sorry if I went over time.
Thank you so much, Philip. And that was very insightful. Thanks so much for sharing those insights from this collaborative effort. I would now pass the ball to Shula. Please, the stage is yours, and we'll collect questions. Please post them in the chat, and we'll have the question and answers at the very end.
Just a second. Yes, thank you, Philip. You warmed up the stage very well. So I'll be continuing with an example from Sweden. So Formas sustainability initiatives I'll be talking about. So Formas was established in 2001. And we are financing research and innovation, and it's like one of the agencies in Sweden. There are different agencies depending on like what type of responsibilities they have. So our 3 main areas of responsibility are environment, agricultural sciences, and special planning. So we are funding research and innovation with an annual budget of 200 million euros approximately, and we have around 100 colleagues. Our vision is based on knowledge creates a sustainable world. But how does Formas contribute to this vision? We are funding best research and cutting-edge innovation. We also produce systematic evidence synthesis, which aim to make it easier for Sweden to achieve its environmental objectives. In our work, taking part in dialogues and collaboration with different organizations and stakeholders is seen very essential. We also communicate research and research results and have an ambition to take an active role as a knowledge broker. So there is different types of instruments we work with. Some examples are researcher-initiated calls, where about 1/3 of our whole funding goes. The other 2/3 of the funding goes to targeted calls that we announce both nationally and internationally, as well as to co-funded research. So one of the important instruments is the national research programs that were initiated by the Swedish government. These programs are 10-year programs to address societal challenges. And in total, there are 13 programs, and Formas is responsible for 4 of them on climate, sustainable spatial planning, food, oceans, and water. So another important example that we work with is the Impact Innovation, which is the next generation strategic innovation program. It is an actor-driven and long-term collection of forces aimed at contributing to global competitiveness through sustainable development transformation. So in this work, Formas collaborates with the Swedish Energy Agency and Vinnova, which is the innovation agency in Sweden. So we relate our work closely with Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. Some of the examples are in 2020, for instance, we conducted an analysis of which SDGs and targets Formas has a major responsibility and opportunity to contribute to. So another example is that all applicants must classify their SDGs their research contributes to. So they pick from 1 to 3 SDGs in application process. We report these in our annual report, or sometimes when we monitor some specific calls, it's one of the aspects we analyze. We also open thematic calls for Agenda 2030, and the recent one was during last year, and it was a pilot call together with 10 funding agencies from 4 continents. And the call was aimed at accelerating achievement of the SDGs by implementing results of ongoing or recently finalized research and projects. We also organize a conference on Agenda 2030 each year with a different theme, and we also take an active dialogue with the National Research Coordinator and the research community. So before I move on to Formas sustainability work, I will briefly mention a regulation that we have in Sweden. So this regulation is also shaping our work related to sustainability, so it's quite important. The regulation makes it obligatory for government agencies to have an environmental management system. Environmental management system means strategic framework designed to manage an organization's environmental policy and address its environmental impacts. And nearly 190 government agencies are covered by this regulation. So it makes it obligatory for government agencies to carry out environmental assessment every 5 years, or when there's a significant change within the organization. In this environmental assessment, we need to identify our direct and indirect, positive and negative environmental impact, and accordingly create an environmental policy and form environmental targets, especially to decrease the negative direct impact. So each government agency reports their work to the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, in February. And the Swedish EPA publishes an aggregated report in April every year. So our reporting to the Swedish EPA includes carbon dioxide emissions from our business travels, energy usage at our offices, and public procurements. Here, like how many public procurements we have done within a year, both in numbers and value in money, but we also report how many of them include environmental requirements from the providers. These are 3 obligatory parts, but there is also an optional part where we can report statistics about our digital meetings on platforms such as like Teams, Zoom, or Skype. So continuing to our work then, so as required by the regulation, we conducted an environmental assessment in the late 2019-2020 to identify our direct and indirect negative and positive environmental impacts. So an example to an indirect negative impact for our case is the funded projects which contribute to emissions through travel or energy consumption at research facilities. An example to direct negative impact we noted was the emissions from our business travels or products or services we buy as a public procurement. So through this assessment, we identified some key areas to work with in order to decrease our negative environmental impact. And as a next step, we created an environmental policy outlining our aims and how we plan to achieve them. So this policy also includes environmental targets and an action plan with activities that helps us to achieve our targets. One of our environmental targets is about decreasing emissions from business travels yearly. And in order to support that target, we have created a meeting and travel policy in 2022. So this policy is used as a guide within the organization when we plan our meetings or travels. It's not only for Formas co-workers, but also for any person who participate in our activities or who travel on assignment and at the expense of Formas. So the policy emphasizes minimizing travel to reduce emissions, and it also encourages holding meetings without travel whenever appropriate and promotes online participation to reduce long-distance travels. Our environmental policy targets and action plan were valid during 2021 and 23. So this year, we conduct a new assessment in order to update these documents and to identify if there are new aspects that we need to include in our work related to environmental impact. So here is actually an example of our emissions data, like statistics since 2017. We cooperate with a travel agency for our bookings and emissions data, and they use greenhouse gas protocol in order to calculate the respective emissions. And as you can see, before the pandemic in 2019, we had around 125 ton emissions. And this number fell down drastically during 2020 and 21 with the travel restrictions. However, it started to go up again as the restrictions were taken away in 2022. So in order to decrease emissions, we set two targets, one short-term and one long-term. The long-term target is about reducing emissions from business travels annually and achieving net zero emissions by 2030. So this is quite an ambitious target, but it pushes us to decrease emissions and then take relevant actions in order to reach that target. So the short-term target is focusing on reducing emissions from business travels to a maximum of 22 tons of carbon dioxide by the end of 2023. So this amount is actually almost 80% decrease compared to the base period 2017 till 2019. And as you can see in 2023, we recorded 22.2 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, so nearly meeting our short-term target. So this represents an approximate 82% decrease in emissions from 2019 till 2023. So one significant factor contributing to this decrease is that since the pandemic, we've been holding all the panel meetings that assess projects online. So these panels meetings consist of reviewers located in different parts of the world who used to travel to our offices for the panel meetings. So currently we still continue with this implementation and allowing only the chair and the vice chair to travel to our offices if they travel by train. So this is also one of the questions that I will be discussing during my presentation. So how can sustainable considerations be integrated into the processes of funding research projects? So we are aware that the research we fund can have a negative environmental impact. However, we can't require researchers to report their travels or emissions since we lack the resources to monitor this at Formas at the moment. So what we have done is that since 2020, we include a section in each call under Before You Apply, where we encourage applicants to take environmental considerations into account when they plan their project. So we urge them to collaborate primarily through online meetings and to travel in a climate smart way if travel is necessary. So we also include aspects to minimize energy use, other resource consumption, or waste in their project planning process. However, this is not a criteria that we assess during the assessment process, basically. But we see that from time to time when we check some applications that researchers are reporting their travel, how they are going to prioritize train trips or how they are going to collaborate with other countries, but then they will take the meetings through online. So moving on to the next question of the webinar, what type of collaborative actions do we need to take in order to mobilize and scale up the sustainable initiatives in research? So this question has been an important one, not only for funders, but also for higher education institutions in Sweden. They have expressed their central role in efforts to combat climate change and the importance of contributing through their teaching and research, as well as the need to reduce the impact of their own operations. In 2019, 37 Swedish universities and colleges created a combined climate framework. So the purpose of the climate framework was to mobilize higher education institutions in Sweden to take responsibility in climate transition. So this framework was intended to serve as a support in their strategic climate work. And we at Formas initiated a dialogue on potential collaboration with member universities in 2020. And later on, the following year, 2021, this climate framework was adopted in a revised form and now is referred as Higher Education's Climate Network. And we decided to finance this climate network with Vinnova, the innovation agency in Sweden, and with other higher education institutions so that they can continue and scale up their work. So it's a 4-year project that is ongoing between 2022 till 26, where 37 universities are members of the network. So they work with 13 different focus areas that include, for instance, public procurement, energy usage, waste management, or travels. And they aim to contribute to society's ability to achieve set goals through education, research, and collaboration. But they also aim to enhance collaboration and knowledge sharing among higher education institutions, particularly influencing the entire sector. The project leader is the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. So they hold events, workshops, and organize conferences on various topics. They also work in groups, different working groups, basically. And each of led by a different university to promote collaboration within the network. Considering that the Swedish higher education sector is large with over 54,000 employees and almost 400,000 students, I think this network serves as a good example of how we as funders and universities can collaborate and work together and support the entire sector, which can contribute to the climate transition. So here are some key takeaways. This is mostly for like an internal process, I would say. So we experience that leadership and management within the organization is very important when it comes to driving change and implementing actions to improve sustainability initiatives. We also observe that regularly communicating good practices within our organization has created an impact. One example here is that our colleagues who have traveled, for instance, from Stockholm to Brussels by train share their trip with pictures to promote their international trips, basically, which also encourage others to do the trips by train. We also observe that collaborating and sharing best practices with other government agencies have helped us to improve our sustainability work. Here, I don't only mean the funders, but also like the other types, because we act as a system here according to the regulation. So it helps us to see from a broader perspective instead of only a funder perspective, basically. And in that work again, we also hear the universities as well. So what are the main challenges within this work? So the first one I would say that we do not have 100% role for working with sustainability issues at Formas. So although I have the sustainability coordinator role, which is around 25% of my working hours, basically. So I mainly work as an analyst. So sometimes it can be a challenge to prioritize and manage limited resources effectively. And we also see that many colleagues at Formas want to prioritize climate smart options, such as when it comes to traveling. We see that flying is sometimes prioritized since it's time efficient, and especially when they want to travel to other countries, so which is understandable, of course. But it can take some time for us to implement our policies or goals in real life, since behavioral change takes time. But then the important thing is to discuss about like what type of initiatives we can take in this work. And sometimes tasks are prioritized to be delivered quickly with short deadlines. So I experienced that sustainability aspects might be seen as a separate part of the organization. So integrating these aspects into every part of the organization can be challenging sometimes. We also face a challenge regarding thinking beyond reporting as a part of the regulation in Sweden. So this regulation definitely makes it easier for us to coordinate the sustainability initiatives for government agencies and work in a more systematic way together. However, sometimes it can become like a hot topic right before the reporting time, and then maybe it's a little bit more chill, or like they forget about it during the rest of the year. So that's why it's important to communicate these aspects regularly in order to improve our work. So these are my part, I think, and I'm done. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Shule, for showing us how Formas helps to promote ecological sustainability in research. I then have the pleasure to pass the word to my colleagues from NWO. Please, the stage is yours, and I'll go on mute now. Stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Let's see whether it works. Do you see the proper screen? Yes, perfect. Well, thank you so much for these wonderful presentations, Philip and Sule. It's very good to recognize a lot of elements you mentioned. You can see that there's different perspectives and opportunities to explore how to encourage sustainability within the funding scheme and your operations as organization. I can see that there's differences between the organizations. For example, we do not have any regulations from the government yet on reporting, which gives a different context as well. So for us, we are really just starting. I've started as sustainability officer in November last year, and we're starting to explore the whole system as well as mentioned by Philip. It's very important to get insight in the role of the organization within the whole system and how we can work together with others on this. So we have an ambition to be climate neutral in 2030, which is very ambitious. And right now I'm exploring, for example, with the different options we can arrange with bottom-up and top-down initiatives. As mentioned in the EMBO network, there was our presentation during the webinar, during the session held, Green Labs was present as well. It's a very strong movement in the Netherlands of laboratories initiatives that are trying to enhance the certification of laboratories on their sustainability. It's a big movement, and we appreciate it very much for their efforts. We also have our own. It's part of NWO actually, the Dutch Research Council. It's KIN, the Dutch Climate Research Initiative. And they're focusing really on the system change and how you can have research more proactively engaging on challenges of climate. So we want to work with them as well. And another party which is identified as being very important is the ministry, of course, who's our main funding partner. But for now, we also act already in trying to adapt our funding requirements towards researchers. Actually, it started the whole discussion because of the collaboration with the fossil industry. So we wanted to make this discussion give room for another perspective, a more broader perspective actually on collaboration and the importance of collaboration, because you really want to have impact with your projects, and it's part of the sustainability of the project that you're funding as well. That there's the knowledge is being shared actively. So we took the opportunity to not only define a new criteria of working together with third parties, but also to reflect on our impact definition. We are going to ask researchers to reflect on the potential undesired impact as well as the desired impact, which you normally ask for in projects. NWO currently uses 3 impact approaches. Impact outlook, which is really actually it's research with a focus on the scientific impact, but we are trying to provide means and methods to stimulate the opportunities to see the opportunities for societal impact, and also to be able to monitor those. Then we have projects that are using the impact plan as an approach, as impact approach, and that's where the research is really focused on the social impact. So it's you're using a theory of change and the impact pathway in order to really explain how your project is going to have impact on society, and focused on productive interactions, which means the interaction with the target group and, for example, the third-party stakeholders, such as enterprises or institutes you're working together with, or governmental organizations. And then there's impact focus. It's targeted on research again, but we're trying to encourage the researchers to take one step further, to go from the sphere of control, where the normal research is, to the sphere of influence, and see how they can influence their context with the research they're doing. So what we are asking for right now is, in the definition, is to reflect on the societal change of the project. So how could the project contribute on people, society, and planet for now and future generations? And we're very curious to see the response on this part. So we'll definitely keep you updated. And that's, I think, one of the most important things I've learned thus far in the interactions with colleagues. We are all starting and exploring, and it's so important to share this knowledge, and therefore it's great to have these series of webinars. And on that note, I will give the word to Joseph, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joseph, a colleague of Annemarie at the NWO Dutch Research Council. And since we are approaching the end of this series of 3 webinars organized and hosted by Science Europe, I would like to take this opportunity to look forward to the future. And I'd like to take the opportunity to suggest the establishment of a European network on greening research or greening research practices. At this moment, it's no more than an idea. There have not been taken any concrete steps in that. So I want to ask the audience of this webinar whether this would appeal to some of them. What we are seeing now in the landscape, and we've heard that during all the 3 webinars, including today, that many people, many organizations, networks, countries are busy implementing or thinking of policies, actions to make research practices more environmentally sustainable. But what we also see is that these initiatives, from grassroots initiatives to ministries, they are less connected than they should be. So in different countries, in different disciplines, different areas, we see similar efforts. So we thought, isn't it time to align these efforts that would strengthen the position, we believe, of each of us, and we could share best practices or worst practices, and we could learn from each other. And there are some other aspects like standardization, because it would be beneficial, I believe, if different countries, different institutions across Europe would take a similar approach. We could also talk about certification, broadening, and deepening of this process. Next slide, please. So the ambition would be to build a network of relevant actors across Europe to facilitate and accelerate the transition towards green, sustainable research practices. And it's a multi-stakeholder effort, as Philip said, and other people said as well. So we would like to invite science funders, research institutions, existing initiatives, including grassroots initiatives, and research networks to join this plan, and to join forces and establish such a network. and the scope would be Europe-wide, all scientific disciplines, and possible implementation mechanisms. We could discuss this later, but it's not unlikely that greening research ends up on the new ERA policy agenda, and then a coordination support action CSA would maybe be appropriate, but it could also be a different way to implement that. Just to finish, because Science Europe has also a task force on greening research, we do not want to compete with somebody, not with Science Europe, not with other initiatives, but we want to connect them and to empower them. So it would be a natural step to build a network which can really work out different aspects of greening research practices in different work packages. And to conclude, if anybody is interested in this idea, COP here stands for Community of Practice, but it could also be called a network. Please use the chat for expression of interest. You don't have to give your email address as stated here, but if possible, also write down what the kind of topic you are interested in, or otherwise let Science Europe know, or send an email to me, and we can see what the next steps would be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph, for presenting this this nice idea for a joint effort on this joint challenge that we all face. So I have 2 questions in the chat. The first one is directed at you, Shule. The question would be whether FORMAS has a dedicated team to lead the work that you presented, or whether this is done as a part of a wider role within FORMAS. That would be the question to you.
Yes. I mean, as a coordinator, I have the main role about talking to key people in the organization. And as I mentioned in the presentation, that we do this environmental assessment. And when we do this assessment, we talk to different parts of the organization and listen to co-workers and their needs and feedback for different areas. Then we gather like these ideas and then create like what type of work we need to do in the upcoming years. And then create our governing documents or guidelines. And in these governing documents, for instance, we specify which departments are responsible for what questions, or which people will be responsible. So we kind of distribute to different parts of the organization, but I have the main role about like coordinating and what type of work we need to do. But in this work, I also think what we are doing at the process with the old managers we have, basically, because they operate sometimes in very, very different parts of the organization. So I need to be able to connect with them, basically. So I hope it answers the question.
Thank you very much, Shule. The second question comes from Ina of the Austrian Science Fund. It's dedicated to you, Anne-Marie. Do the researchers have to reflect on all the different impact approaches that you presented? So outlook, plan, focus, or only one of them?
No, fortunately, only one of them. So actually, we already use this approach of impact. So per call, there's a different approach that's being used. And what we're now changing is enlarging the definition. So the reflection will be broader. Use it per different approach. And in addition to that, we're asking really for the undesired potential effects of research. And that's going to be like DFG, actually, is there a plausible story that is being presented and it's not being valued? What is being valued is actually the impact approach that's explained in the call. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. And we have another question coming in. Let's see to whom this could be directed. So how do you see the role of ethics and research ethics reviews in this entire discussion on the sustainable character of research? Is there an example perhaps of such a synergy occurring in your respective organizations? Not sure who would like to take on this question. Do you have any specific examples to share? I see I see a lot of question marks. Philippe, perhaps do you have an example to share from your experience in this regard? You're muted, Philippe.
Sorry, it's a tough one. These questions about ethics. I mean, for me, in general, there is a big ethic question that comes at the beginning, right? When we talk about all these things, it's like it is ethical to maintain a healthy planet for future generations, if you want to say so. And everything that is against that, everything that threatens that is unethical. So so far so good. So how we can really like dive into ethics reviews, I think I would have to, I don't have an example right now.
Thank you so much. Do any of the colleagues want to chip in, or otherwise I would also have a question perhaps, but if you have a question, an example, I'd be very interested as well. Otherwise, Shule, perhaps a question to you. You mentioned that you're not currently considering the considerations on the environmental footprint in your assessment procedures. And I was just wondering whether you are planning to do so in the future, just maybe to hear in which direction this would be going, and perhaps also the reflections as to why it is currently not part of the assessment.
It's a very relevant question because the universities are also covered by this regulation. So as an aggregated emissions data, they report, but sometimes maybe we finance one institution, so we don't know if they are really reporting or not. So it's again like the resource issue, unfortunately. Then we need to be having some people that is controlling or monitoring these emissions or like the energy usage, basically. So that's the main reason. And if they report, then there will be double work that they report to us, and then they also report to the Swedish EPA. So that was the main reason why we chose to support this climate network, because they are working directly with 37 universities in different work groups, and then they are sharing their best practices between each other. So this is kind of like a way of starting, basically. Maybe in the future we will be considering doing that, because we see examples even within Science Europe that some people or like some countries are following up these emissions. So this is also an inspiration for us. But at the moment we do not have that discussion that we will be following up.
Thank you very much. Are there more questions coming in? Yes, there is one more at Anne-Marie, dedicated to you. Will NWO use the CSRD materiality assessment framework to go about to discover the unforeseen societal impacts of research? Is that a path you're currently investigating?
Well, actually, we're not obliged to use the CSRD. So as such, as the CSRD, I wouldn't use it as a criteria. But of course, materiality analysis is very important. The contact with the stakeholders is very, very important. That's what I try to indicate as well in the approach we're trying to take. So yes, we're definitely going to discuss with other parties to also look at the impacts of research. As for now, our focus will be on climate neutrality, so not the social side, but it's definitely something we do take into account. And if you look at the discussions at the international level as well, with the Global Research Council, for example, that element is very, very much stressed. So we do listen to it, but we'll go step by step.
Fabulous. Then, as I don't see any more questions coming in, oh, there's a very last one. If it can be a super brief answer, Joseph. It is, oh, no, it's actually an expression of interest. So it's no question to answer for you at this point. So I would like to thank everyone for today's very interesting discussions and for participating at today's webinar as well. Very much looking forward to the discussions that will continue out of this. Thanks a lot for raising the ideas on the community of practice as well that I find particularly pertinent, interesting to follow up as an idea. So thank you very much to Science Europe and all the speakers for organizing today's session. And if you have any questions related to today's speeches, then you can reach out to Science Europe. Also, if it's a question directed to myself, of course. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon. See you soon.